Okay, so in the last video, what we did is we defined a schema in another file, and to be precise, a GraphQL file. And we got that file working with Babel so that it understands and imports and is able to add it to our type defs. In this video, what we're going to be doing is, well, we're going to be actually having another query. And this time the query is going to be for resolutions. So to get started, let's go ahead and actually return some information from a query. If you remember, we simply just required the ID and name. Okay, so that's what should be coming out of resolutions. So, well, let's go ahead and write the query that would return, in theory, all of our resolutions, which is going to be essentially an array of, at this point, IDs and titles. So in our resolvers in register API.js, we're going to have a comma here because this is just JavaScript after all, and we're going to have what is a function named resolutions. So resolutions, okay? And in here, we're simply going to return an array of objects, which are going to have an ID, and this can just be a generic string here, and then a comma, and then is a title or name? What did I gave this name, not title. So this can be name. And we'll be say, get stuff done. Okay, that's the resolution here. So we only have one item inside of our array here, but what we did is we defined a query that will return an array of items. In particular, it's going to return an array of actual resolutions. Now, one thing that we did before, and we created our test schema up top here, is we actually had to create a type of query, and that query returned a string. Well, here we have a query, and it's returning an array of an object. Well, what do we do here? Because if we head to our app, you're going to get some errors, and these errors are going to say, hey, query.resolutions is defined in your resolvers, but not in your schema. And what this means is that, hey, we have this query in our resolvers, right? But it doesn't exist as an actual schema. And now we have a couple of solutions to this, and we could come in here and add another line to our query type. And the query type, we could add our new query type, which is resolutions. And we actually expect resolutions to return. And if your head's in JavaScript land, you might be thinking something like, oh, okay, we just need it to be an ID with a string and a name with a string. This is not right. Because what we're returning here isn't an object with IDs and strings. It's a resolution, which we've already defined as its own thing, right? We gave it a type of resolutions. And so, actually, I might want to, while we still can, change this resolutions to resolution. Just a small change there to keep in mind. But what this is a single resolution. So instead of returning a string, what we're going to be turning is a resolution. But we're not returning a resolution. We're returning an array of resolutions. So to define that, we just simply have to wrap this in a bracket. So this is part of the beauty of GraphQL, and right now you might not realize how big of a thing this is for you, but it's going to be one of those bigger things that once we get into just some of the cooler stuff of GraphQL, it's going to be a total aha moment. So we have our resolutions query is returning an array of a resolution. Okay, now this resolution is defined as an ID and a name. Both of them are required, and both of them are going to be here inside of our object. So let's head back to our code here, refresh, and you can see, hey, everything's working again. And if we head to our graphical and our Apollo DevTools, or the graphical window itself, I'm sorry, the type is small here, but you remember when we typed hi, the hi auto-completed for us. Well, let's see if resolutions auto-completes. And it doesn't auto-complete for us yet. However, if we hit play here, you're going to see we get a little spinny guy. I think that might be more of a bug with the Apollo dev tools themselves than anything else. Let's actually head to our graphical editor itself, which will be refreshed here. And if I open this and type R, you can see resolutions does show up. So yeah, this /graphical at your domain might just be a little bit more reliable right now than the Apollo dev tools. You can always close these and reopen them, and I guarantee you this would work. However, right now, hey, resolutions right here is going to work. Now on our other query, we simply just had the query name and we got to hit enter and it returned string. With this query, that's not going to work. If I type in resolutions and hit the play button, well, Graphical is going to do something for us. It's going to say, hey, did you mean resolutions? Oh, yeah, I did. I meant resolutions. But, well, resolutions must have a selection of subfields. And what does that mean? Well, when we're doing a query, especially a query, well, not especially, but when we're doing a query that returns an object or an array of objects, we have to specify which items in that object we actually want. This is simply the power of GraphQL, because we only get the stuff we want and none of the stuff we don't want. So if I say ID here inside of 2 more brackets, actually let me bump the font size up so you can see this a little bit better. If we say resolutions bracket and then ID and hit go, it returns that ID. And if I, on another line, say name, it returns that name. So this is brilliant because, again, we're only getting what we ask for. And again, this isn't hitting the database. It's nothing fancy. It's simply just returning the array that we're asking for. But it's going to be really cool if we actually add another item in this object. So we do like a comma, okay? I don't know, you're formatting. I don't like this kind of formatting, to be entirely honest. I prefer it like this, but prettier is deciding that this is the way it should be. And let's go ahead and I'll change this ID to maybe a bunch of F's, and we're going to say lose some weight. Okay, so we got 2 resolutions here. These are very common resolutions. I'm going to get stuff done. I'm going to lose some weight. You could probably do both of these at the same time. And basically, right now, if we head back to our graphical, run this query again, you can see that it gives us an array of both of these items. And again, if we decide, hey, we only want the names of these and we don't want the ID for whatever reason, we can run this and we're just going to get the names. Again, graphical is one of those definite aha moments because you start to see the power of this query language, right? We're not hitting an API and just getting a bunch of data. We're saying, hey, give me this specific data, and the app is obliging to that. And the API is actually sending you that data that you want rather than a whole bunch of stuff that you're not asking for. This is great for a whole ton of reasons. And a lot of these reasons are going to become more apparent as we write more stuff. So at this point, we can actually head to our app, and instead of querying this hi query, well, we can modify this hi query, and in addition to saying hi here, because why not, let's leave this hi in here, we can actually come in here and add in this resolutions line as well. Although I do want the ID, so let me go ahead and specify that I want the ID as well. Notice again, there's no commas here. This is a string. And you can see here, again, this isn't JavaScript, but we do have what you could call an object with our query and the items that we want from it. And you can leave this just like this. And if we were to check React, you'd be able to see that everything's available within data. Now, I know that it's available within data, so I'm not going to check at this point. But what we want to do now is, well, we can wrap this in parentheses, wrap this in maybe like a div, move this hi inside of a div, and whatever. I'm just going to iterate over this. So I know this data exists, so we can say data.resolutions and .map. And here we can map over this just like anything, and we could just have this be a resolution. I should have chosen a shorter word. And inside of here, we can just return. I should have actually wrapped this whole thing in maybe like an unordered list. That might be better. Okay, and then we can have an li. Now on this li, we can have a key, and the key will just be the resolution dot underscore ID, right? Comes in right here. And the value of it will simply just be the resolution.name. Could save all this, let Prettier do its thing, fix all of my formatting issues, and check it out. This is really nothing fancy. All the data is coming in via data.resolutions, comes in from this name. We map over that array, and we have each individual resolution, and we output it as a list item. This should be basic React. I would just assume that you would know this, so I'll leave this here for a second. You can check it out. And here, let's head back to our app, and it looks like we are getting an error. Okay, now this is an interesting error because, well, I know this data exists, but it's telling me it can't read property map of undefined. So what's going on here? Because before we had data and it output hi just fine. But now that we're asking it to say, hey, resolutions is an array, well, this doesn't necessarily know that resolutions is an array. And if we, let me comment this out, we will check React DevTools with this commented out, and we will see that, well, hey, this data is going to be in here. So what is up with that? Let's come in here. There's a faster way to do this, but who cares? Data dot, where are we? Resolutions, an array with 2 items. So why can't it map over this? Well, when this component first loads, the data doesn't necessarily come in immediately. So to prevent this from happening, so how do we prevent this from happening, right? How do we prevent React from trying to load our GraphQL stuff before the data is available? Well, there's a couple of things we could do. We could set up some default props and have this resolutions array be an array. So you could do that, although you can't set up default props on a nested prop. So that one's out for right now. However, we're going to fix that capability at some point as well. Another answer that we have is, hey, we have this data.loading. What's up with data.loading? And I can't show you this because it's going to zoom by too quickly, but before this data is here, we do actually have data.loading set to true. So before anything else loads or resolutions or any of our queries run, we'll have data.loading available for us off the bat. So once more, let's make a modification to this component. I'm going to wrap, instead of parentheses, I'm going to wrap it in brackets. We're going to return these parentheses here, return. Okay, so something like this. Prettier is going to fix all this formatting for me, so don't care about that. And now what we want to do is say if data.loading, right? If our data is loading is set to true, then we're just going to return null. You'll probably want to return some sort of loading component at some point. But what this does is GraphQL gives us access to loading right off the bat without having to do anything. And this way we can just say, hey, if the data is still loading, return null. Otherwise, if this is done loading, then you can then return our array of items. Okay, so check this out. This is going to work now. We're not going to have any more crazy errors. I can refresh this. I can do anything. We have it on our list of get stuff done, lose some weight. Super cool. Okay. So what do we do in this video? Well, we actually, we created a new query, right? Our query is our resolutions, which is returning this array here. And we did so, even though it's in our register APIs, we still created this under the query type here. We then used that query to give us what we wanted, the ID and name. And then we then learned about the data.loading, so that we could prevent our component from trying to access data that doesn't exist. Now again, I'm going to fix this with default props eventually as well, but knowing about data loading is very important. I use this data.loading on pretty much every component that's getting data, so this is a great thing to have. So yeah, super cool. This is all working really nicely for us, and once we have data coming in from our database, it's going to function just like this, but instead of returning an array, we're going to be returning a Mongo find.fetch. So in the next video, what we're going to be doing is actually attempting to move resolutions query outside of our resolvers file, because obviously you're going to have enough queries where you don't want them to just live inside of one register API file. So just like we did with our resolutions.graphql file, importing it and stuff like that, we're going to do something similar but different with our resolvers. And I'm going to explain a little bit about a problem that we'll encounter along the way. So fire up the next video and learn about how to keep things more separated here. As always, this is Scott with Level Up Tutorials. If you want to help support Level Up Tutorials, head on over to leveluptutorials.com/store. And you can become a Level Up Pro, get access to all of the premium content in all of the paid series. If you're a Level Up Pro, or if the subscriptions aren't your thing, you want to buy each one individually, or buy the ones that you care about, you can buy them individually. That's available to you as well. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of great new GraphQL content this year. So if you're interested in GraphQL, sign up now and watch as each new series comes in, and you can vote on all the new series coming up. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.